We are back with Simone Bowie Jones. Simone, who are some women in your field you admire and respect?
Well, there are several. I can start off with Barbara Alexander, who was the managing partner at my firm. I think she's a good example of someone who is dedicated to the law, who loves the law, um, as well as someone who carries herself with tremendous style and sophistication. Um, I also graduated with a number, well, one particular friend with me who is actually a partner at a competing law firm. And through her, I've become friends with a number of other close related attorneys. And they inspire me in the sense that it is good to have people that are on a similar journey um, to the one that you're on, that are supportive of you and helpful and know exactly what you're going through. So they, though being my peers, are also inspirational to me. And I think within my office in particular, there's another partner, Gina Phillips Black, and she has 3 children, and she definitely is an example of how it is that you can put everything in and be dedicated to that work and make that balance of having a strong family and a healthy work-life balance.
What, what are most people surprised to learn about you when they get to know you?
Surprised to learn about me. Surprising. Um, well, I would say that at times I can be intimidating to others. Um, so I think sometimes they're surprised to realize that that's not actually the case. But I've actually made, I think, a more of a concerted effort to be less intimidating, and be more accessible. So hopefully it's less surprising now.
Let me go to the chat room for a second. Um, Nick Nick MCD said, "Greetings. Just got home from running. Literally ran home to catch the show. Simone comes from very distinguished and accomplished parents who have served their country with distinction. She's well on her way to be a powerhouse of change. She's one of the most brilliant Jamaican and Caribbean women I've ever met." And Leslie said, "I like that she says, I guess she went, yes, I would start doing that." So I want to talk to you about two of the major mergers and acquisitions you were part of.
Yes.
Only because there's, and I'm fishing here, a sort of a paradox I noticed. Um, the acquisition of Air Jamaica by Caribbean Airlines, and then there is the Tortuga franchises. So here's the question: from a personal and nationalistic level, and this is the Air Jamaica by Caribbean Airlines acquisition, how challenging was it to work on a case in which a Trinidad and Tobago company was acquiring a national airline of Jamaica?
Well, if I'm honest, it was challenging. It would have been challenging regardless of who was acquiring the airline,
Uh-huh.
because Air Jamaica really was beloved by many Jamaicans. It meant a lot to us that we had a national airline, and for the most part, it offered excellent service, champagne service, and it was a pleasure to have Air Jamaica. That said, Air Jamaica was costing our government a significant amount of money. And it was not, in my view, in the best interest of the nation for us to continue to bleed the money that we were losing as a government simply in order to maintain a national airline. Trying to choose my words carefully here. Um, that said, at that point, I think I looked at it more of it would be best for us as a country to get the best deal out of the sale of the airline as possible. And from that point of view, it would have been irrelevant who the purchaser was. I think that Trinidad and a number of companies from Trinidad have made worthwhile investments in Jamaica, and that's great. However, I do think we have some trade issues with Trinidad that need to be resolved because our supermarket shelves are flooded with products that are manufactured by companies in Trinidad and Tobago. And my understanding is that we are a very large export market for them. But it is in turn actually quite difficult for us to get products. This is my understanding, into Trinidad and Tobago, and they're not necessarily even as receptive towards our citizens or the persons who are going there for work and school per se. So in that regard, I think there's a lot to be done in terms of building the relationship between the two countries.
I am just rooted to my spot, having listened to the way you explained why it was interesting, why it was necessary and to participate in this acquisition. It sort of it makes me hardly want to ask my next question about how you felt when Jamaica Producers Group acquired a majority interest in the other merger. So my point there is sort of mute. But let me ask you this though: what did these successes mean f- for your firm and to you personally?
To me personally, I have to, as an attorney, particularly one that practices in the corporate sphere, um, it's important in building your reputation and your experience,
Mm-hmm.
the knowledge that you gain from being a part of these large transactions. So, in terms of success, because it's not that someone is going to just come to you, particularly as a commercial attorney, and hand you this award and say, "Oh, Simone, you're doing such a great job." In terms of success, it means a lot to be able to gain this level of exposure and to be able to advance your career because after a while, it's like when you prepare your resume. When you're looking for a job and you're fresh out of school, the information that you put on your resume is about, the college you went to, the grades that you got, where you worked in the summer, fine. But at this stage, what they want to see on your resume basically is the deals that you were involved in. So that speaks to how much it does for you reputationally and how it advances your knowledge and just helps with your development professionally.
Are you a workaholic, Simone?
I would not describe myself to be a workaholic because I think even prior to, I've made a lot of references to the work and family life balance. But even before having my son, having a balance between doing things that I enjoyed and entertainment, because, for example, I'm a very big carnival fan.
Oh, really?
Um, yes, it has been important to me. But operating at a high standard and satisfying expectations in the context of work is very important to me. So from that point of view, I guess the answer is yes. Because if I have a task to do, then I'm going to try and get it done to the best of my ability. I'm going to try and get it done quickly and effectively and accurately. And so if that means it's going to, take all through the night to get this done, then I'm going to get it done. Um, but I know that, for example, there are people who are so passionate about the law that even in their spare time, they want to read law books and opinions. I would not describe myself like that.
How would you or what advice would you give to other lawyers on how to find a balance between their law firm life and their home life?
I think it is about, first of all, having realistic expectations
Hmm.
and being clear to yourself and honest with yourself about what means the most to you. I think with people sometimes their desires and what they really want to have can change. But you need to be fair to yourself about what it is that you really want and how you can manage those expectations. So, for example, it may be that you actually have to appreciate that the job you have might not be suitable for the family that you want to have, whether it is the size or the time or the level of attention. Maybe it is that you need to move from being in a firm to, for example, in-house counsel. those are changes that you have to consider. Um, in terms of advice, I think that's basically it in a nutshell. That you have to charter for yourself what it is that you want, and then have an honest assessment of where you are, what are the opportunities that are available to you, what is the expectation for you at work, and what is the bigger priority at this given time. Because it's very hard to have your cake and eat it too. And there are going to be lots of times when you do feel dissatisfied or worry about whether or not you're actually um, creating that balance. But it's about just being honest with what it is that you ideally want and where you actually stand in relation to those ideals.
If you were to eavesdrop your parents telling a stranger about you, how do you think each of them would describe you?
Well, I should clarify that my father actually passed away. And my father passed away a week before it is that I started law school. And I can confidently say now that if you were eavesdropping on a conversation that he was having during that time, that he would have been the happiest father that you could have found. Because I think my parents never gave me a feeling of heavy and weighted expectations and this pressure to succeed and anything like that. I think what my parents and more so my mother focused on was that you need to understand that there is no gold spoon or silver platter waiting for you. So whatever you want for yourself, you need to put yourself in a position to get it. And that has always been my focus. So even in the context of law, it's not that anybody was sitting there saying, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be a lawyer, and you need to get this done. But I knew that for my father, it was as if I had fulfilled something for him. So if I was eavesdropping on a conversation during that time, unfortunately, and not 5 years before, I know that he would have been very proud. Um, in relation to my mother is now retired, and we are coming to that time in life where your roles and responsibilities shift, where the child is now becoming more and more of the parent. And I think in relation to my mother, she again tends to have a lot of good things to say. She, I think, is very appreciative of the fact that I am always there for her. I'm very supportive of her. Um, she's had her share of illnesses that she has dealt with, and I know that I have been very consistent in my presence for her. Um, she would probably talk about the fact that when I was younger, um, she wasn't sure whether I would succeed or not because she was very concerned about whether or not I was focused enough. And I remember around the same time when I would have been getting ready to take A levels, I went to, I think, the hairdresser, and we would have had that same hairdresser for years from then coming up. And the hairdresser said to me, your mother was just here and she was talking about it and how worried she is because she says every time she comes to check on you in your room to see if you're studying, you're sleeping on the books. And she's like, she doesn't know if Simone thinks she's going to learn this information by osmosis. So I think if you were eavesdropping our conversation then, you would have had some cause for concern. But no, I think she only definitely has good things to say.
What are some typical challenges you deal with in your field?
Um, there are there are challenges in terms of even as a young professional woman in Jamaica, how you present yourself and demonstrate to clients that they can be confident in you and your abilities. So as I said, we do a lot of work for overseas clients, and sometimes you can be approached from the point of view of, oh, this is just a little law firm in Jamaica. Do they know what they're talking about? Do they know what they're about? And you immediately have to start off by establishing the fact that yes, you are a reputable, intelligent attorney, capable and full of understanding in relation to your local laws. So there is a challenge in that department just from the get-go in establishing that relationship and level of confidence. Even though, as I said, we have a lot of women involved in management and a lot of female attorneys, there is also very often still that kind of boys club, particularly in the business community and businesses beyond a certain size and so forth. So it can also be challenging in that department. Building that same relationship I again described in terms of making your clients be your confidant, being there when the deals are being struck and negotiated, because very often these things can happen in, you know, locations and spheres where you're actually not there. So that is one of the challenges that, you know, for example, I face now that I continue to work at and find ways to work around. I think the law firm that I work with, you know, we again try to be very technologically savvy and up to the time in terms of what is available to you from a resource point of view. So fortunately, I think that works in our favor in terms of the ease at which we can get things done.
Uh-huh.
So that's not so much a challenge for me in the day-to-day context.
Of your current areas of practice, competition and consumer protection, mergers and acquisition, etc., which gives you the most satisfaction?
Well, I think when you work on a large merger or acquisition, it can be very exciting. It's very intense for a period of time,
Uh-huh.
and you're working on the same matter, you know, day and night. But then you get it's almost a sense of victory as if you'd won a case at the end when the deal is done. And when you then read about it in the paper and you can say to yourself, okay, well, I was actually a part of this. And when you facilitate the you know, whether it's a change of employees, the restructuring, I do get a sense of satisfaction from that.
Is there any hair pulling with any particular case that stretches you to the limits or that have stretched you to the limits?
I mean, there's a hair pulling in a number of cases. Something that perhaps I should actually amend my profile to more accurately reflect is that I give a lot of advice concerning banking and financial regulations.
Uh-huh.
So one thing that can cause a lot of hair pulling is that, you know, with a lot of the changes that we've had with technology, the law, particularly in a country like Jamaica, is not always there in terms of what people are now doing. So you might have a law that's been in place from 1945 or 1975 or even 1990, but it's not keeping pace in terms of what people are, how they're actually operating in the field that's being regulated. So very often I'm approached by people who have, you know, very creative schemes and concepts, and they're looking to me to basically advise and say, oh no, you can go ahead with this and you'll be fine. And that can be hair pulling because they tend to, you know, try to push you in a direction that you don't necessarily want to go to get the answer they want, as opposed to necessarily the answer that's there in the law or the answer that speaks to where you think the regulator is going. So I definitely can have some frustrations there.
Tell us about the Graduates Foundation and how you got involved.
Well, the Graduates Foundation is actually started by another attorney at my firm, Andrea Scarlett Loza. And she looked at it from the point of view of, you know, there are a number of children that come up in the school system and they are actually not acquiring the right skills at the right levels, but they're being elevated from grade to grade. So at some point, they end up being, for example, in second form, and they actually are not reading effectively. They're having challenges with skills such as comprehension, and they're struggling with school. And very often, when they get to the point of actually having to take the exams now at the fifth form level, that's when everything starts to go awry. So the concept of the foundation was to basically offer additional classes, extra lessons to these students to help them and to help basically reaffirm what it is that they were doing in school and to help them in the special needs, the special areas, you know, that they need attention. As a part of it, the course is also extended to etiquette training, exposing them to other professionals, and most importantly, to rewarding some of the successful students who had attained good grades after taking the equivalent of CXC. I think is it Kate? No. Rewarding them with assistance to go to sixth form, or if they made it through sixth form to in terms of the first level of tertiary education. So for example, in 1 year the foundation was able to secure positions through JC for students who wanted to go to sixth form there, as well as we've had a very good, a very um, impactful success story with this young man who basically they were able to get a grant for him to go to the Maritime Institute. And he has now graduated from that program and is doing very, very, very well.
When have you been most satisfied in your life?
What has made me feel most satisfied?
No, when have you been most satisfied in your life?
I would say right now.
Right.
Yeah, I would say that, we all grow and mature and over time put things into perspective. But I feel that I have come to a point where I feel that I have such a strong and clear understanding of myself as a person, of the things that I would like, about what I'm working towards, and that I have an adequate support system, that I definitely would say that time is now.
Quickly, two pieces of advice you would give to young people aspiring to become attorneys.
I think my first piece of advice would be to aspire to become something else. The reality is that the field of law it's becoming not redundant but overcrowded. Particularly here in Jamaica, where they have adjusted the entrance requirements and increased the class size. I believe they made those changes based on a desire to make the educational institutions self-funding, as opposed to an accurate assessment as to whether the market can actually absorb all the attorneys that are now being produced. I think that traditionally in the Caribbean, there was always this belief that if you're talking about a profession, it's either you're a doctor, a lawyer, or an Indian chief. And basically, my advice to any young person would be to consider what other skills they have. To point out to them that, for example, law is a profession where you bill by the hour, and therefore your labor is tied directly, your reward is tied directly to the time that you put in. There are many other professions and things that you can do where you can be adequately and well rewarded and actually spend a lot less time. I think the direction that the world is going in is a direction that is embracing a lot more creativity, technology,
Yes.
and what we need, particularly in the Caribbean, is more entrepreneurs, people with the ideas and the dedication to set up the businesses for themselves. So it's not as I think there should ever be another lawyer or that you can't pursue it. But if you're young and you haven't made the choices yet, don't be pigeonholed into thinking that this is just one of the easier options available to you. It's time that we focus more on building other areas, whether it's agricultural, whether it's the sciences, and whether it's the focus on entrepreneurial skills. I think we generally need to have a shift.
For those days when you don't feel like getting up and doing what you have to do, who or what gets you out of that mindset?
Well, right now, part of that mindset has to be the fact that I now have a mouth to feed that is entirely responsible, that is entirely my responsibility. So the option of not necessarily getting up and getting going is, as far as I'm concerned, it's just not there. Well, also, I think for me, I wouldn't say that I am a person that places, how do you know that there are people, you call them people pleasers. I wouldn't say that I'm a huge people pleaser, but I do not like to disappoint. And I do not like to believe that I'm not meeting the expectations that are there for me. So that, of course, plays in my mind on those mornings where I feel like, I could just lie here. And at the same time, I think what's important is that when I assess myself and what I have done and what I have put into something, that I feel that I've done my best. And I don't want to feel that I'm at work or not at work wasting time when I could be doing more, like we're more efficient. So I just don't have that feeling, because I have to get up and I just have to get these things done.
What are you most proud of?
I think I'm most proud of the way that I think I have matured. I think one of the qualities that I'm happiest that I have is an ability to self-assess. I think it's very distressing when people are unable to identify their own flaws and their own weaknesses. And I think I do a pretty good job of looking at myself and saying, okay, you really need to work on these things. You really need to address these things. These are the things you need to grow at, and these are the things that you need to work on. And I think having ability to step back from yourself and do this kind of self-assessment and to be receptive to criticism from others really helps you in the long run.
That helps. I agree.
Yeah.
I
And
agree.
so, oh, go ahead.
No, sorry. No, I was just saying that I agree. I want to just jump into the chat room for a second. Nick saying, I am of the view that Jamaicans and Guyanese must boycott Trinidadian and Bajan services and products. The treatment of Jamaican and Guyanese citizens by the Bajans and Trinis is distasteful. I am compelled to ask you this question. If you were to if you were to go to your favorite place with a favorite book, a favorite drink, and favorite music, where would this place be? What will you be reading? And what will you be drinking? And what will you be listening to?
The place would probably be in Portland, in Jamaica.
Portland?
Yeah.
Okay, I must remember to check that out.
Yes, it's beautiful. I would probably be reading. I'm trying to remember the name of the author of a book that I just finished not too long ago, and it's an Indian author. And a friend of mine was telling me about a series of books and short stories that she has. And I think that's what I would be reading, because it's actually a lot harder for me to get to read books these days. I don't have as much time. So I would be reading a collection of short stories with at least the goal that I would accomplish reading most of them, within that time. What would I be drinking? I would probably be drinking something relatively light. I do like, I would say I do drink alcohol, and I do like wines. I like whites as opposed to red, and I have a favorite right now. So I'm one of those people that trend towards the sweeter side, but without going all the way over to like a Moscato. So maybe a Riesling. I'd probably be drinking that. And what was the other part?
Music.
The music that I've been listening to. It's very cliche to say I've been listening to Bob Marley, but it definitely is some of the most relaxing, but yet, actually intelligent music you can listen to.
I agree.
But if I wasn't relaxing, then I probably would be listening to soca. Which is why I can't strike out too hard against Trinidad in this conversation at all, because I definitely have some assets that I'm very appreciative of.
If you could go back in time, what would you tell your 15-year-old self?
Not to be so judgmental. I think when I was younger, I had very strong opinions about a lot of things, but in hindsight, I realized that I tended to view things as being just black and white. But there's a lot of gray in this world, and you don't understand it then. So I had very strong opinions and very strong sentiments. And I think I may have come across in some instances as being too judgmental and perhaps too forceful. But I think life has taught me that you have to learn how to appreciate the gray and how to maneuver around it.
I like that. What makes you laugh out loud?
Just about anything my son says. And I would say that my husband has a way of making me laugh when I need it the most.
Awesome. Simone, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It really was a pleasure just having this chat with you. The time actually went by a lot faster, a lot easier than I thought it would. I was like, this whole hour during the races, but I really have enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm glad that you gave me this opportunity.
Same here. Thank you very much. Okay. Good night.
Good night.